The sky was on fire. General Marcus Kane stood on the command deck of Titan Base, his eyes fixed on the massive holographic display. Thousands of red enemy signals covered the screen, alien warships closing in fast. The Xel'Tar Empire had come to finish what they started. "Status report," Kane said, his voice calm but firm. Colonel Reeves, his second in command, turned toward him. Her face was pale, but she held her ground. "Enemy fleet detected minus 7,000 warships. Our forces, less than 800 remaining." A heavy silence filled the room. The numbers weren't just bad. They were hopeless. Titan Base was the last human stronghold in the system. If it fell, Earth would be next, and there was no one left to stop the invasion. The Xel'Tar warships descended like a swarm of locusts, their sleek, black hulls reflecting the dim light of Saturn's rings. They were massive. Each ship was twice the size of any human battleship, armed with weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Inside the alien flagship, High Commander Virax observed the human base with cold, reptilian eyes. His species had ruled the galaxy for centuries. To them, humans were weak, inferior, just another race to be conquered. "Humans always fight to the end," Virax hissed, his voice echoing through the chamber. A foolish trait. His tactical officer, a tall Xel'Tar with sharp, blade-like arms, nodded. "Titan Base cannot hold out for long. We should begin the final assault." Virax raised one hand. "Not yet. First, we will break their spirit." Back on Titan Base, the room darkened as a transmission signal came through. The holographic display flickered, and suddenly, High Commander Virax's face appeared, his golden, snake-like eyes filled with amusement. "Humans," Virax said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Your resistance is meaningless. You are outnumbered, outmatched, and out of time." Kane folded his arms, his face unreadable. Virax continued, "Surrender now, and we will allow some of you to live as slaves. Fight, and you will all die." The command center fell silent. Every officer, every soldier held their breath, waiting for Kane's response. The general stepped forward. He looked directly into the transmission feed, his expression hard as steel. "This is General Marcus Kane of the United Earth Defense Fleet," he said, his voice steady. "I have one message for you, Virax." He leaned in closer. "Go to hell." Then, without hesitation, he cut the transmission. Alarms blared. The Xel'Tar fleet was moving in. "Enemy warships entering firing range," a technician shouted. Kane turned to his officers. "All defensive systems online. Fire at will." Titan Base's ion cannons roared to life, sending powerful energy blasts toward the approaching alien ships. Human warships, what remained of them, launched forward in formation, weapons blazing. The battle had begun. But it was not a fair fight. The first wave of Xel'Tar warships unleashed a storm of plasma fire. Human cruisers exploded instantly, their debris scattering across space. Titan Base's shields struggled to hold, flickering under the relentless assault. Inside the base, engineers scrambled to keep systems online. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. The entire structure shook as enemy blasts struck the outer defenses. Colonel Reeves gritted her teeth. "We can't hold out for long." Kane clenched his fists. He knew she was right. The Xel'Tar were too strong, too many. The base would fall. It was just a matter of time. And yet, something inside him refused to accept it. There had to be another way. Just as all hope seemed lost, a strange alert flashed on the screen. "General, we're picking up an unknown energy surge." A communications officer called out. "Deep space, coming in fast." Kane frowned. What kind of energy surge? The officer's fingers flew across the console. I don't know. It's not Xel'Tar technology. And it's not coming from Earth either." Kane and Reeves exchanged a look. What the hell was out there? Then, suddenly, a new signal appeared on the screen. one massive object, moving straight toward the battlefield. The officer's voice shook with disbelief. "Sir, it's a warship. A single human warship." And then, the system identified. Kane's heart stopped. Reeves whispered, "That's impossible." Because the ship's name was Excalibur, a warship that had been lost for years. And yet, here it was. The battlefield was in chaos. Titan base trembled as another explosion rocked its outer defenses. Human ships, outnumbered and overwhelmed, fought desperately against the Xel'Tar fleet, but it was a losing battle. Plasma fire tore through their ranks, reducing proud warships to nothing more than burning debris. General Marcus Kane stood firm in the command center, his gaze locked onto the holographic display. The enemy was closing in. His soldiers fought with everything they had, but deep down, he knew the truth. They would not last much longer. Yet, something was changing. A new signal had appeared, a warship unlike anything seen before. It was fast, powerful, and most shocking of all, it was human. The name on the screen sent a chill through the room. Excalibur. A ship that had vanished years ago. A legend whispered among soldiers. A warship so advanced, it was rumored to be humanity's greatest weapon. And now, it was here. Colonel Reeves stared at the screen, unable to believe her own eyes. It can't be. That ship was lost in deep space. The communications officer's hands trembled as he tried to make sense of the readings. "Sir, it's real. The Excalibur is approaching at incredible speed." Kane didn't hesitate. "Open a direct channel. I want to know who's on that ship." A few tense seconds passed. The battlefield raged on outside. Human ships continued to fall. The Xel'Tar fleet, sensing victory, pushed forward. Then, suddenly, a deep, commanding voice came through the speakers. "This is Captain Adrian Wolfe of the Excalibur. Looks like you could use some help." The room fell silent. Captain Wolfe, a name Kane had not heard in years, a name that should not even be alive. He pressed a button on his console. "Wolfe, how the hell are you here?" A low chuckle echoed through the speakers. "Long story, General, but we can talk later. Right now, you need to fall back. Excalibur is engaging." Before Kane could respond, something incredible happened. The Excalibur accelerated toward the battlefield, a single warship against thousands, and fired its first shot. A blinding beam of energy erupted from its main cannon, tearing through the void of space like a blade slicing through flesh. The impact was immediate. An entire Xel'Tar dreadnought disintegrated on impact. No explosion, no debris, just pure destruction. The command center erupted in gasps. Even Kane, a battle-hardened general, couldn't hide his shock. The Xel'Tar fleet hesitated. Their ships slowed, unsure of what they were facing. Then, Excalibur moved again. It danced between enemy warships with impossible speed, its sleek hull untouched by enemy fire. Every shot it fired obliterated its target. Where human weapons barely scratched the Xel'Tar armor, Excalibur ripped through them like paper. In minutes, dozens of Xel'Tar ships were gone. The aliens had never seen anything like it. On the enemy flagship, High Commander Varrox watched in horror. His confident sneer had vanished, replaced by something rare for his species. Fear. "What is that ship?" he hissed. His tactical officer fumbled through data streams. "I don't know. It shouldn't exist. It is using energy signatures far beyond human technology." Varrox slammed his clawed hand on the control panel. "Find its weakness. Now." But there was no weakness. The Excalibur continued its assault, turning the tide of the battle. Human forces, inspired by the impossible arrival of the legendary warship, fought back with renewed strength. Kane's voice roared through every allied channel. "All units, rally behind the Excalibur. We take back this battlefield. Now." The surviving human warships regrouped, forming a defensive line. With the Excalibur leading the charge, they struck back, cutting through the Xel'Tar fleet. For the first time in the war, the invincible alien empire was on the defensive. Virox bared his fangs. This was unacceptable. Send in the war beasts. A new wave of enemy ships emerged from the Xel'Tar mothership. These were not ordinary warships. They were living creatures, massive, armored beings, each the size of a city, genetically engineered for destruction. They surged forward with terrifying speed, their organic hulls resisting conventional fire. They latched onto human ships, crushing them like insects. Kane's face darkened. They're bringing out their worst. Inside the Excalibur, Captain Wolf remained calm. He tapped a few commands on his control panel. His AI assistant, a smooth-voiced entity named Orion, responded instantly. "Shall I activate the Omega Protocol, Captain?" Wolf took a deep breath. "Do it." Orion's voice turned cold. Omega Protocol activated. The Excalibur shifted. Its entire structure began to transform. New energy barriers appeared. Its weapons glowed with an unnatural light. Then, in an instant, it vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't accelerate. It simply disappeared from all sensors. On Titan base, Colonel Reeves' mouth fell open. Where did it go? Kane had no answer. The Xel'Tar fleet paused, confused. Their war beasts froze in place, unsure of what to attack. Then, Excalibur reappeared, but it was no longer alone. A dozen energy clones of the warship surrounded it, each moving in perfect synchronization. Virox's eyes widened. Impossible. The clones attacked all at once. Energy beams cut through Xel'Tar ships, ripping them apart in a storm of destruction. The war beasts howled in agony as they were torn apart from the inside. It was a massacre. Within moments, the battlefield belonged to humanity once more. Titan base's defenses stabilized. The surviving human fleet reassembled. The Xel'Tar Armada, once so confident in its victory, was now in full retreat. Inside the enemy flagship, Virox trembled with rage. He had underestimated humans. Again. With a snarl, he gave the order. Fall back to the homeworld. We must prepare for war. Because now, he knew the truth. Humanity was no longer the prey. They were the hunters. And the Excalibur was their deadliest weapon. The moment the last of the Xel'Tar ships retreated into the vastness of space, silence enveloped the battlefield. The Excalibur hovered in the middle of the debris, the energy shields flickering softly as the warship reformed into its original state. Its weapons were still hot, glowing with the intensity of its earlier assault, but now there was a calmness in the air, a momentary peace after the storm. General Kane stood at the command center of Titan base, watching the monitors in disbelief. The Excalibur, a ship thought to be lost forever, had just turned the tide of the war in humanity's favor. But even as the victory was celebrated, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. "We've won the battle," Kane said, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "But this changes everything. What was that ship really capable of?" Colonel Reeves, still absorbing the shock of the Excalibur's appearance, glanced at him. "That ship is more than just a weapon, sir. It's a game changer. Captain Wolf, we need to understand what happened. The Xel'Tar didn't expect us to have something like that." Kane nodded grimly. "No one did. But we'll need answers. We need to understand how that ship was built, how it came back, and most importantly, who's on it. We've never seen anything like it, not in any of the data we've gathered on their fleets." Before anyone could respond, a voice came through the comms, low and confident, cutting through the tension in the room. "This is Captain Wolf. General Kane, I need to speak with you." His tone wasn't one of arrogance or superiority. Instead, it was strangely calm, almost like he had been expecting this moment for years. Kane straightened at the mention of Wolf's name. He had heard that name before, long ago, before the war had even begun. He had thought Wolf was lost to the far reaches of space, but the truth was far different. "Put him through," Kane ordered. A holographic projection of Captain Adrian Wolf flickered to life in front of him. The man looked much older than the last time Kane had seen him. His once dark hair was now streaked with silver, and his expression, though stern, carried the weight of the years spent lost in deep space. But his eyes, those eyes were unchanged. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much, experienced too much, and understood the cost of survival. "General Kane," Wolf said, his voice steady and unwavering. "It's good to see you again. We've got a lot to talk about." Kane didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Where have you been, Wolf? What is this ship? And why now? Why didn't you return sooner?" Wolf's expression darkened. "I'll explain everything, but not here. Not over comms. We need to meet face to face." Kane hesitated. "You've just saved our entire fleet, Wolf. I owe you an explanation at the very least." "I'm not the one who needs an explanation, General. You'll understand soon enough. There's much you don't know about the Excalibur, about what it was made to do." His tone was sharp, almost ominous, and it sent a chill down Kane's spine. "Where are you now?" Kane asked. "I need you to rendezvous with us immediately." Wolf's lips curved into a slight smile, but it was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're already here. Just follow the signal." Before Kane could respond, the hologram vanished, and a series of coordinates blinked onto the screen. Hours later, Kane stood at the entrance of the massive hangar bay on Titan Base. The Excalibur loomed before him, its enormous hull casting a long shadow across the floor. It was a ship built for war, no doubt, but there was something about it that felt otherworldly. It was as if the ship itself wasn't just a product of human ingenuity but a living entity, something that could think, adapt, and respond like a sentient being. The massive hangar doors began to close, and Kane saw Captain Wolf step down from the Excalibur's landing ramp. He was dressed in the same battle-worn uniform Kane remembered, but there was a new aura about him now, something that set him apart from the man he had known. Wolf walked toward him, his boots echoing through the quiet hangar. "General, it's good to see you again," he said, his voice soft but commanding. "Wolf, you've got some explaining to do," Kane replied, his tone blunt. "Start with the Excalibur. What is it? And why was it hidden from us?" Wolf looked up at the Excalibur, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. "It wasn't hidden. It was lost. The Excalibur was part of a project, something far beyond what you know. Humanity's ultimate weapon, designed to ensure our survival against an enemy like the Xel'Tar. But the ship wasn't ready. Not when it should have been. We had to leave it behind." Kane's brows furrowed. "But we thought it was gone. It was lost in deep space." "It was. But it wasn't alone. It's part of a much bigger operation, a strategy that goes back long before the war even started. The Excalibur was never meant to fight alone. It's a symbol of what we're capable of when we unite. And it's not just the ship that makes it powerful." Kane's confusion grew, but Wolf wasn't finished. "The Excalibur's eye," Wolf continued. "It's not just a machine. It's a hybrid, part human, part something else. It was designed to learn, adapt, and evolve. And it has. In ways that no one could have anticipated. What you saw today, that was just the beginning." Kane stood in silence, processing what Wolf was saying. The Excalibur wasn't just a warship. It was a weapon of unknown potential. And as terrifying as it was also humanity's greatest hope. "But there's more, General," Wolf said, his tone growing darker. "The Xel'Tar are just the beginning. There are forces out there, far more dangerous, waiting for us to make our move. And when we do, we'll need more than just the Excalibur. We'll need an entire fleet." Kane's mind raced. "A fleet? How?" "Follow me, and I'll show you," Wolf said. "It's time to prepare for the war humanity never saw coming." And as Kane followed Wolf deeper into the ship, he couldn't help but wonder, what had humanity truly uncovered? What secrets had been hidden from them all these years? And what was coming next? The interior of the Excalibur was unlike anything General Kane had ever seen. The walls weren't just metal and circuits. They seemed to pulse with an energy of their own, an unseen force that hummed beneath the surface. The air smelled faintly of ozone, like the scent of a storm right before it broke, and yet it was eerily calm, as though the ship itself was waiting. Kane followed Captain Wolf down winding corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. Wolf moved with purpose, his eyes sharp and focused. Kane could see the tension in his posture, the way his every step seemed calculated, deliberate. The Excalibur wasn't just a vessel. It was a fortress, a weapon, and it was built to house something far more dangerous than anyone had realized. They entered a vast chamber deep within the ship, a room so massive that it took Kane a moment to process the sight before him. In the center of the room stood a towering holographic display, showing a map of the galaxy, dotted with countless stars, systems, and sectors. But what caught Kane's attention were the ominous red markers scattered throughout the map. Each one signified an unknown enemy, a threat yet to reveal itself. "This," Wolf said, turning to Kane with a grim expression, "is the true purpose of the Excalibur. It's not just a warship. It's the command center for something far bigger, something humanity never prepared for." Kane's brow furrowed. "I thought the Excalibur was our last hope against the XLR. Are you saying there's more?" "There's always more," Wolf replied, his voice low and steady. "The XLR are a force to be reckoned with, but they're only one part of a much larger threat. What you see on this map is just the beginning. These red markers, they represent the locations of fleets that have been watching us for years, waiting for us to become a bigger threat." Kane's heart skipped a beat. "You mean, we've been under observation this entire time?" "Exactly," Wolf confirmed, his eyes narrowing. "The XLR are just the vanguard. The true enemy is much more ancient, much more powerful, and far more insidious. They've been lurking in the shadows, manipulating the galaxy's major powers, waiting for humanity to advance far enough to pose a real challenge." Kane took a step closer to the map, his eyes scanning the red markers. Each one seemed to pulsate with a dark energy, as if the very stars around them were infected by an unseen force. "But why didn't we know about this? Why wasn't there any indication of their presence?" Wolf sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Because they've been hiding in plain sight, using our own weaknesses against us. They've infiltrated our politics, our military, and even our research. Every time we've made a breakthrough, they've been one step ahead, feeding us just enough information to keep us from realizing what was really happening." Kane turned to face Wolf, his expression a mixture of disbelief and concern. "So what do we do now? How do we fight something that's been manipulating us for so long?" Wolf's eyes met his, and for the first time since their reunion, Kane saw a flicker of uncertainty in the captain's gaze. "We fight smart. We use the Excalibur's AI. Its intelligence is unlike anything we've ever created. It can predict their movements, analyze their strategies, and give us a fighting chance. But we can't do it alone. We need allies. We need to unite the galaxy under one banner, or we'll be picked off, one by one." "But who do we trust?" Kane asked, his voice hoarse with the weight of the question. "We don't even know who these enemies are, let alone where to find them." Wolf stepped up to the holographic map and began manipulating the display. The stars rearranged, zooming in on a section of space Kane had never seen before, an empty, desolate stretch of the galaxy where no major civilizations had ventured. "We start here," Wolf said, pointing to a distant sector, the red markers glowing ominously. Kane studied the coordinates, his mind racing. "Why here? What's so special about this area?" "This is where the enemy's true power lies," Wolf said, his voice grim. "The Excalibur's AI has detected a massive anomaly, a kind of energy signature that doesn't belong. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. I believe this is where their fleets are coming from. But why hasn't anyone discovered it before?" Because it's been hidden, buried beneath layers of deception. The Xel'Tar and their allies have been feeding us false data for years, keeping us distracted with smaller skirmishes while they prepare for something far worse. Kane's mind was reeling with the implications of what Wolf was saying. This wasn't just a war anymore. It was a race against time, a desperate battle to uncover the truth before the enemy could strike. "What's our next move?" Kane asked, his voice steady, despite the weight of the situation. "We need to mobilize," Wolf said. "We'll gather all the ships we can, and we'll head to that sector. The Excalibur's AI will guide us, but we'll need to be ready for anything. There's no telling what kind of forces are waiting for us." Kane nodded, the determination in his eyes hardening. "We'll need to rally every resource we have. Our fleets, our best officers. The Excalibur can't do this alone." "No, it can't," Wolf agreed. "But with the right strategy, we'll stand a chance." The holographic map shimmered, and a new set of coordinates appeared, this time with a countdown timer. It was a race against time, and the enemy was already preparing for the next phase of the war. But this time, humanity wasn't going in blind. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Wolf said, his voice filled with resolve. "We're fighting for the future of the galaxy." Kane stood tall, his mind made up. "Then let's prepare for war." The Excalibur's engines hummed to life as the massive ship began to move, its powerful thrusters pushing it forward with a force that could rattle the very stars themselves. General Kane stood at the command deck, looking out over the vast emptiness of space as the galaxy stretched before him like a sea of unknowns. Behind him, the crew moved in precise synchronization, each person aware of their role and the critical nature of their mission. The weight of what lay ahead was heavy on everyone's shoulders, but there was no turning back now. Kane's mind raced. The Excalibur was humanity's last hope, but it was also the first true weapon capable of taking the fight to the enemy. Yet, as the massive warship cruised deeper into uncharted territory, there was still so much they didn't know. The Xel'Tar were one threat, but the real war was only just beginning. Kane couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse awaited them, something hidden in the shadows, pulling the strings of the galaxy. "General," Captain Wolf's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've just entered the sector. The anomaly's closer than we thought." Kane turned to see Wolf, his expression serious as ever, standing at the helm. The man was always calm in a crisis, but Kane could sense the same unease in him that gnawed at his own gut. "What's the status of the fleet?" Kane asked. "We've got half a dozen ships in formation, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. But we're not the only ones who know about this anomaly. I'm picking up faint signals coming from the vicinity." Kane's pulse quickened. "Who else is out here?" Wolf tapped a few commands on the console, bringing up a series of encrypted signals on the screen. "It's unclear. The signals are being scrambled, but they're definitely not friendly. We could be walking straight into an ambush." Kane clenched his fists. He had anticipated this, but the reality of it was still unsettling. The galaxy wasn't just in a state of war, it was on the brink of chaos, and if they weren't careful, humanity could find itself overwhelmed by an enemy it couldn't even comprehend. "Prepare the fleet," Kane ordered. "We move forward cautiously. I want eyes on everything." As the ships continued their course, Kane's thoughts kept returning to the map Wolf had shown him. The red markers, each signifying a potential enemy fleet or hidden base, haunted him. Every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the galaxy's secrets, and with each passing moment, the unknown grew larger, more dangerous. The Excalibur drew closer to the anomaly, and as they neared, the space around them seemed to warp. A strange energy pulse rippled through the ship's hull, sending vibrations through the walls. Kane could feel it, a deep sense of wrongness that settled in his bones. Whatever was out there, it was powerful, and it was waiting. "Captain," Kane said, his voice low but filled with urgency, "I want a full scan of the area. Don't rely on our sensors alone. I want manual checks." Wolf nodded sharply, giving commands to the crew. The atmosphere in the command center shifted, a palpable tension filling the room. Every crew member knew they were about to cross a line they could never return from. Minutes later, Wolf turned to Kane, his face pale. "General, we found it. The source of the anomaly. It's not just an energy signature. It's a weapon, one unlike anything we've ever seen. It's as if the very fabric of space is being torn apart." Kane's breath caught in his throat. Torn apart? How? "It's hard to explain," Wolf said, his voice strained. "It's like a rift in the fabric of space-time itself. It's generating a field that distorts light, gravity, and even time. If we get too close, we could be pulled into it." Kane clenched his jaw. This was worse than they had imagined. The enemy wasn't just hiding. It was harnessing forces far beyond their understanding. And yet, there was no retreat. There was no turning back. Humanity's survival depended on them reaching this unknown zone and taking control of whatever lay within. "Prepare to engage," Kane said, his voice resolute. "All ships, take defensive positions. We move in slowly, but we move forward. We cannot allow this anomaly to remain unchecked. If we don't stop whatever's causing this, it could tear apart everything we fought for." Wolf nodded, his expression hardening with determination. "Aye, sir." As they approached the anomaly, the stars around them began to bend and twist unnaturally, as if the very laws of physics were no longer in play. The Excalibur's shields flared in response, glowing a deep blue as the ship's defenses activated, but it wasn't enough to quiet the growing unease in the pit of Kane's stomach. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a crackling sound on the communications channel. Kane's heart skipped as a new transmission cut through the noise, one not originating from any of their ships. It was a voice, distorted and incomprehensible at first, but then it began to clear, and the words sent a chill down his spine. "You're too late," the voice said, its tone cold and mocking. "You've crossed into the domain of the true masters of the galaxy. And now, you will die." The transmission cut off abruptly, and the room was filled with a stunned silence. Kane's eyes narrowed. "Get me a response team now, and ready all weapons." But even as he gave the orders, a part of him knew that the real battle was about to begin. They weren't just up against a powerful enemy. They were about to face a force so ancient, so overwhelming, that it could unravel the very fabric of the universe itself. The Excalibur shuddered as the force of the enemy's message settled over the crew, leaving a lingering tension that seemed to grip the very air. It was as though the words had not only been spoken, but had also carved a permanent scar in the minds of everyone on board. Kane could see the looks on the faces of the crew members. Confusion, fear, and uncertainty. The realization had dawned on them all at once. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very existence in a universe where they were nothing more than ants beneath the feet of an unseen ancient power. The enemy wasn't just a threat. It was an entity, a force so old and powerful that it had molded the galaxy in its image, manipulating the course of history and life itself. And now, it seemed to have found humanity, a species still learning the rules of war and peace. Kane's mind raced. Could they really face something like this? His thoughts were interrupted by a voice coming through the ship's intercom. It was Wolf, his tone sharp and commanding, though Kane could hear the undercurrent of fear. "General, we're picking up another anomaly in our path. It's huge, and it's moving. This is no ordinary weapon. Whatever it is, it's alive." Kane's heart skipped a beat. "Alive," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. The very idea was enough to rattle even the most seasoned warriors. But the captain's voice crackling over the intercom brought him back to focus. "Yes, sir. It's like it's responding to our presence. The readings are off the charts. We've never seen anything like it before. I don't think it's a ship. I don't even think it's a weapon in the traditional sense. It's something else entirely." Kane clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the situation pressing in on him. It was no longer just about a battle between species or advanced technology. The Excalibur had entered a dimension where the laws of physics and the very fabric of the universe were in question. The enemy they faced wasn't something that could be understood through tactics or firepower alone. It was something that existed outside the boundaries of reason and comprehension. "Are we sure it's not a trap?" Kane asked. "That transmission we received, could it be some sort of trick?" Wolf hesitated, but Kane could hear the truth in his words as he responded. "It doesn't feel like a trick, sir. It feels real. And it's not slowing down. We're being drawn toward it." The lights on the Excalibur flickered as the ship began to alter its course, almost as if it were responding to the invisible pull of the anomaly. Kane stood up, the reality of their situation becoming clearer with each passing moment. His hands were steady as he turned to face the crew. They were all looking to him now, waiting for direction, waiting for reassurance. But there was no reassurance to give. No plan that could guarantee their survival against an unknown entity like this. It was clear that whatever was ahead was not something they could fight or outrun. It was an intelligence far beyond their understanding, with a power that made their greatest weapons seem insignificant in comparison. "We're approaching the anomaly," Wolf said, breaking the heavy silence. "Brace yourselves. I don't know what's going to happen when we cross into its domain." The moment those words left Wolf's mouth, the Excalibur lurched forward, its hull groaning under the force of the gravitational pull. Kane felt his body pressed against the deck, a sensation unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The ship's systems were struggling to maintain control, and the crew was visibly straining to keep things together. "Hold it together," Kane barked, moving swiftly toward the bridge. He could see the crew members struggling at their stations, sweat beading on their foreheads, as the ship's controls fought against the powerful force drawing them closer. "We can do this. Focus. Everyone focus." But the truth was undeniable. The ship was no longer in control. It was as if they were being pulled by an invisible force, the Excalibur unable to resist its advance. The walls seemed to warp and twist as the very fabric of space itself began to break down around them. The stars outside blurred and faded, replaced by a swirling, dark void that swallowed everything in its path. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pull stopped. The Excalibur's engines roared to life again, struggling to stabilize the ship's trajectory. For a moment, there was silence, a complete, suffocating silence. And then, they emerged into the heart of the anomaly. What they saw was beyond anything Kane could have prepared himself for. A massive structure, glowing faintly with an eerie, unnatural light, hung in the vast emptiness. It was not a ship, nor a station, but something far older, far more complex. The entire thing seemed alive, pulsing with energy, its surface shifting like the very surface of a living organism. "Holy hell!" Wolf muttered, his voice barely audible over the comms. "What is that thing?" Kane could only stare, his heart pounding in his chest as the reality of their situation hit him. They had crossed into something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a weapon or a trap. It was a living, breathing entity, and they had just walked into its lair. "What do we do now?" a crew member asked, her voice trembling. Kane swallowed hard. He had no answers, but one thing was certain. They couldn't turn back now. The Excalibur had already entered the domain of this being, and whatever lay ahead, humanity's survival depended on the choices they made in the coming moments. As he stared at the entity before him, Kane knew that this was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of the galaxy itself. The fate of every living thing hung in the balance, and the Excalibur was humanity's last hope. But how would they face something that was neither man nor alien, but something far beyond their understanding? Kane had no idea. All he knew was that the fight had only just begun. The atmosphere inside the Excalibur was thick with uncertainty as the ship hovered before the massive, pulsating structure. Time seemed to stretch and contract in this strange, dark space. The crew members sat at their stations, hands trembling but resolute, awaiting the next move. Their eyes were fixed on the unknown, each person grappling with the same question. What now? Kane stood at the helm, staring at the entity before them. It wasn't just the size of it that unnerved him. It was the way it seemed to defy all logic and reason. There were no visible weapons, no discernible threat in the traditional sense. It was as though it existed outside of the confines of what they understood as alive. Its surface shifted and flickered with an eerie, unnatural light, as if it were breathing or pulsating in time with some unfathomable cosmic rhythm. "General," Wolf's voice broke through the silence, pulling Kane back to reality. "I don't think we can just sit here. Whatever that thing is, it's watching us." Kane turned slowly, his gaze hardening. Wolf's words had struck a nerve. They weren't just visitors in this place. They were trespassers, vulnerable to an intelligence far beyond their own. And if they made a wrong move, they might not just be wiped out. They might cease to exist entirely. "We need to establish communication," Kane said, his voice steady, despite the raging storm inside him. He knew that anything could happen next, but hesitation could mean their end. "Patch me through to the communications bay. I want to make contact." Wolf nodded and quickly relayed the order, and soon, Kane was standing in front of the communications console, staring into the unknown. His heart thudded in his chest as he prepared to speak. What could he say to something that wasn't even human? Something so ancient and powerful that the very concept of communication might be alien to it. He swallowed hard and spoke, his voice firm but with a tinge of uncertainty. "This is General Kane of the United Earth Fleet. We have arrived as you requested. We come in peace." The words seemed to hang in the air, swallowed by the eerie silence of space. For a long moment, there was no response. Kane felt the weight of every second that ticked by, as if the universe itself was waiting for something, waiting for them to make their next move. And then, something happened. A ripple of energy surged through the Excalibur. It wasn't like anything the crew had felt before. It was a wave, a force that seemed to travel straight through them, vibrating deep within their bones. The ship groaned, its hull shaking as though it was reacting to the very presence of the entity. And then the voice came. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, not a sound that could be heard by human ears. Instead, it was a sensation, a message that coursed through every molecule in Kane's body, a presence that filled his mind and soul. The words were not spoken, they were felt. "You are trespassing." The force of the words was so overwhelming that Kane staggered, bracing himself against the console to stay upright. His crew was similarly affected, their faces contorted in shock and confusion. They had expected a conversation, a back and forth, but this was something else entirely. "You are nothing but a flicker in the vastness of eternity. Your existence is brief. Your weapons are feeble." Kane's mind reeled, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. He was a leader, and he had to maintain control. The human race had come this far, and it couldn't back down now. "We're not here to conquer," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We came to understand. We didn't know we were trespassing, but now that we are here, we seek only to communicate, to learn." "You seek understanding." The voice came again, its tone shifting, now tinged with an ancient, mocking amusement. "Do you understand the scale of your existence, the insignificance of your species in the grand design of the universe?" Kane clenched his jaw, his fists tightening at his sides. It was clear that the entity didn't view humanity as a worthy adversary or even a notable presence. But he couldn't back down. "Not now." "I understand more than you think," Kane said. "We are humans. We fight for survival, for each other. We may be small, but we have the ability to grow, to evolve. We may not be your equals, but we are not so easily dismissed." The voice hummed with a dark resonance, as if the entity was amused by Kane's defiance. "Then prove it. Prove that you are more than a fleeting thought in the vast expanse of time. Prove that you are worthy." Kane's eyes narrowed. This was a challenge. The entity was testing them, not just their strength, but their will, their resolve. And it was clear that the entity was not going to let them leave without a demonstration. A new energy surged through the Excalibur, and Kane could feel it. A sudden, overwhelming force pushing at the very core of the ship. The lights flickered, and the hull groaned again as though something was trying to tear them apart from the inside. "Brace yourselves," Kane shouted. "It's testing us. All hands, prepare for impact." The crew scrambled to their positions, strapping themselves in as the ship began to shake violently. It wasn't just the force of an attack. It was as though the entity itself was reaching into their very souls, testing their mettle. For a moment, it felt as though the Excalibur might be torn apart, as though this was the end. But Kane held his ground, his mind sharp despite the chaos surrounding him. He knew that this was not just a test of their technology. It was a test of humanity's spirit, the very thing that had kept them alive for so long. And in that moment, Kane made a vow. Whatever it took, whatever sacrifices were required, humanity would not go down without a fight. They might be small, insignificant in the eyes of the universe, but they were not weak. They were human, and that made them powerful beyond measure. The shaking began to subside, but Kane knew they weren't out of danger yet. This was just the beginning. The entity had shown its hand, and now it was up to him and his crew to prove that humanity had what it took to stand tall in the face of the unknown.